everyone, Kareem right here. Today we have Mr. Bill Manning, who is the president at Toronto FC and Toronto Argonauts at MLSE, that stands for Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. Bill, thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure, Kareem.
So, how did you get involved into the beautiful game?
So I played the game nearly my whole life. I think I was in first grade when our gym teacher, a guy named Mr. Seeley, handed out a bunch of flyers, and I remember bringing it home. My dad was like, okay, well, we'll bring you down for, or we'll sign you up. And I remember I started out as a goalkeeper. My my first season, and my team lost in the championship of penalty shots, and it wound up going down to the two goalkeepers kicking, and I wound up missing mine, and the other goalkeeper scored, and then I wound up missing mine. I just I was pretty good in net, but and then the next year I didn't want to play goalie anymore, and I started playing outside. But I was very, very young. I think I was first grade, maybe 6 years old or so, and I played baseball and basketball. I wrestled. I played football. I played all the sports growing up, but soccer I really excelled at, and had a bunch of friends I made along the way. And so it's been part of my life basically from first grade onward.
Nice. And can you just share a little bit of your journey of, I know it's a long journey, but I guess the short version of it, of how, you started playing sports and then how you got into the business side of things now, right? So.
Yeah. So, I played all growing up. I grew up in Long Island, New York, and went to the University of Bridgeport in Connecticut on a soccer scholarship, spent 4 years there. And then getting out of college, there was no MLS back in the mid 80s. And so I wound up still continued playing with a team in the New York area called the Brooklyn Italians. We actually wound up winning the U.S. Open Cup in 1991 and played in CONCACAF Champions League. But then eventually the USL came up to the New York area. I actually had played for a team out in California in 1993, and then came back to New York and played for a team called the New York Fever, and had a really good team. A good friend of mine, Peter Vermes, was on the team, was the head coach of Sporting Kansas City. And I was, nearing kind of the end of my playing career. I was turning 30. And I remember I got a call from the owner of the Long Island Rough Riders asking if I'd be interested in being their general manager. And I met with them, and I basically retired from playing and took on a front office role. The Long Island Rough Riders still operate to this day. They play in, I think it's the USL 2 now they play in. And it was a great experience, kind of cutting my teeth in the minor leagues. Wound up moving then to Minnesota, and then eventually to Major League Soccer. But that was my start. I always wanted to work in the front office, and actually at the New York Fever in the USL, I remember they offered me like $2,000 a month to play. We didn't make a lot of money back then, and I was like, God, somehow can I get another $1,000 a month? And he said to me, well, why don't you help out in the front office? And so I would go in, and me and two other players, actually, we'd go in and we would help sell group sales and sponsorships and kind of help out with the front office. And that kind of gave me a little bit of insight, almost like an on-the-job internship as a player. And then got the call from Long Island Rough Riders to be in the front office as a general manager, and we did very well there for a couple of years, and then I moved to Minnesota. So that was my start.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, I wanted to get this on the record and share this with you. When we were at the game at Toronto FC versus Inter Miami 2, I was watching the game, and then I was at the top standing up, and I seen you, and I was like, wow, is that Bill Manning? I'm like, this is crazy if that's him. So towards the end of the game, you were walking towards me. I'm like, this is an opportunity. God, thank you. I got to, take this opportunity and introduce myself and meet you and congratulate you on all the success with Toronto FC. And with saying that, after I went and I had to do some Googling to prepare some questions as well for today's interview. And I seen USL, and I was like, that was pretty exciting, because that's USL Championship is right underneath the MLS, so it's a big stepping stone in the US soccer pyramid, and it was pretty cool to see that's where you started.
Yeah, yeah, it is. And one, I'm flattered that you wanted to meet me, and I appreciate that. We've had quite a bit of success here at Toronto. We're in the middle of a rebuild right now. We're really excited about what's to come in the next few years. But the USL, I still have a very great feeling about my time there. Alec Papadakis and I are actually good friends to this day. He essentially owns the USL. Great, with our pyramid now, how it works. It's a great system, and we, a few years ago, MLS and the USL partnered, where a bunch of our second teams played in the USL, and we broke off and amicably, in that the USL had really established itself with a bunch of cities in the United States where they get good crowds, they have a good level of talent. You saw this year Danny Dicchio, an old player here and an academy coach, is the assistant coach for Sacramento, who made the finals of the U.S. Open Cup. And then we started MLS Next Pro, which is basically for our academy graduates, in that step in between MLS and academy, where we tend to be younger than the USL teams, and so it's an opportunity for our guys to play more against their own kind of age group, and then to train around the first team. So the USL, though, back then, way back, it was called the USISL, and we wound up merging with another league called the APSL, and then they became the USL, United Soccer League. But a lot of good players have played in that league over time, so it's fond memories. In 1999, I won the championship with the Minnesota Thunder, which was my first ring, so that was really exciting.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's always nice to hear all the stories, like, and the history, right? Because I'm just getting started, and it's nice to connect with someone like you to hear the history of the connections from before. But saying that, I've spoke to Paul Burney. I'm pretty sure you guys are connected as well.
Yeah.
And when I interviewed him, I learned that the sports business was all the same. Like the sport that's being played on the field is different, but the front office is the same. With saying that, between the MLS, NFL, and NBA, what has been your favorite sport to be involved in at the front office, and why?
Certainly soccer, because I'm involved on both sides of the business. I'm involved on the on-field side because of my soccer background, and then the off-field side, which is the business side. When I worked in the NFL and the NBA, I was just involved on the business side, which is less stressful, but it's less gratifying too, because being involved in the on-field side of it, you really, you see kind of your impact on how the team does when it does well, and then also when it doesn't do well, what you need to do to get it back to where you want to be, which is a championship team. But I enjoyed my time in the NFL and NBA. That was critical for me in my career, because I'd always kind of been a soccer guy, and I wanted to be more well-rounded. I wanted to be someone who could run a business and could manage a P&L, but also, manage the soccer side of things as well. And so it really opened my eyes to a much, much bigger landscape when you talk the NBA first, and then the NFL, which is, the biggest league really in the world. And it was a great experience, and still have a lot of fond memories. Jeff Van Gundy was a friend when I was in Houston. He was our head coach there, and at the Eagles, a bunch of guys have gone on to be head coaches there: Pat Shermer, Sean McDermott, and Steve Spagnuolo, and just a bunch of guys that were assistant coaches at the Eagles who've gone on to be head coaches. And so it was great seeing their journeys as well. So soccer, the most satisfying and gratifying. But my time in the NBA and the NFL was critical to the executive that I am today.
Nice. When you say managing the P&L, just to confirm, that stands for profit and losses.
Profit and loss, yeah.
Okay.
So I had a mentor early in my career named Bill George, and he was the chairman of the Minnesota Thunder. The Minnesota Thunder was actually the precursor for the Minnesota United. If you look at the chronology, they had changed their name, and then eventually Bill McGuire bought the entity, which was the Minnesota Thunder at one point. But it was owned by a number of CEOs in Minneapolis, and the chairman was a guy named Bill George, who was the CEO of Medtronic at the time. He now is a professor at Harvard Business School, and he had said to me, "Look, where you eventually want to be if you want to run an organization is you need to know how to manage a P&L, a profit and loss." And at that time, like many soccer teams, we were losing money, but I was able to really manage the soccer side, but also the business side, to help lose less money, for lack of better words. And we actually had some real growth on the revenue side, and wound up doing very well on the field. But that stuck with me my whole career. And so he said, you always want to have a budget that you can manage. And if at the end of the day, being a CEO is you manage the revenue and the expenses. And so, here at TFC, I manage the P&L. I manage the P&L in Salt Lake. And it's really good because you have to have a budget that you adhere to. And sometimes when you don't hit the revenue targets you want to hit, you have to cut some costs so that your bottom line number stays on what you planned for your ownership. So it's and it's good. Like, during years like 2017, for example, when we went to the finals, even 2019, you get additional playoff games, which really help because it adds to your revenue and it adds to your bottom line. And so that's an important, I say, for any executive, eventually to manage a P&L, that really means you're running the business.
Got it. What things did you do differently that helped, with the P&L, with keeping the cost low and, reaching the goals of the P&L?
It's just being on top of it. You need good people. You need, I always say a team that wins is going to bring out fans, and a team that has stars is really going to bring out the fans. And so, if you look at even this iteration now where we are with TFC, we had to turn the roster over, but we went out and we got a couple of big stars in Lorenzo and Federico, and some Canadian national team players, and Richie and Mark. And we're going to make some more moves this offseason, similar to what we did at the end of 2015 when we brought in Drew Moore and Will Johnson, Steven, and Clint Irwin. This offseason will be similar to that because at the end of the day, we still have to win. And that ultimately is what really drives your revenue, because a winning team puts more people in the seats, which gives you more sponsorship. You sell more jerseys, sell more food and beverage. And if you can manage your costs efficiently along your budget, you eventually wind up being a well-run business. And so it does go hand in hand, for sure. It's, we've gone now 2 years without the playoffs. 1 year was a pandemic year. But we now next year we're going to make the right moves to get back on the winning track, to help our business. So it's really important for us. So the on-field and off-field are always connected. The clubs that do the poorest generally are clubs where there is no connection between their soccer side or their football side or their basketball side and the business side.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, ticket sales are not a problem for MLS teams now. They're succeeding. They're all succeeding.
Yeah, for the most part, I think the league has grown, especially some of the new teams that have come into the league have really raised the bar. Toronto did that back in 2007 when Toronto came in the league. I remember being, and I actually was in the NFL at the time, and I remember seeing Toronto and saying, "Wow, look what they're doing up there." And it was kind of a new wave of fan base that came into the league. And we've since seen Portland and Seattle come into the league. And then more recently, you saw Atlanta come into the league with great success. Charlotte this past year has come in with big fanfare and big crowds. And what they're doing is they continually raise the bar. And so, here in Toronto, we aspire to be one of the top teams in the league, both on and off the field. And so that was one of the reasons we felt it was really important to go get a player like Lorenzo and a player like Federico. Is the league has done an amazing job of bringing big name players into the league, but generally in their mid 30s or 33, 34, 35. We wanted to bring in a player who was 30, turning 31, and the player was 28 in their prime with Juventus and Napoli. And I think you're going to see more of it in MLS as we go forward and as we continue to grow as a league.
Yeah, that's really impressive. Like, these are some big players that you mentioned. When I was doing my Googling, I was thinking, how was it possible? Like, how did Bill get a player like Lorenzo? How is that possible? And I know it's a very complex process, so I was interested to ask you more about that.
Yeah, I mean, I was like a dog with a bone, and we rolled out all the stops. At the end of the day, I think it was kind of three parts, and one, we had to pay, and we had to make sure we could get the right compensation that could attract a player like Lorenzo to leave Europe in his prime to come here to Major League Soccer. I think the growth of our league and the success of our league, and it is a real football league, and the U.S. and Canada have grown immensely in how they follow soccer, how they follow football. And so I think that appealed to him, and then actually the way of life here in Toronto. It's a large Italian Canadian community here, which was important to him, but also the opportunity for him to go to the movies with his kids and to go to restaurants without, in Napoli and Naples. It's tough for the athletes to live what we would call a normal life, and here in Toronto, even the Raptors players will say it, the Maple Leafs players will say it, is people are respectful. They'll ask for an autograph, they'll ask for a picture or so on, but they do it in a respectful way. And so Lorenzo's really enjoyed his time here so far, and from that standpoint. But we set out a plan that Lorenzo was our number one target. Federico was also on my list. And he came a little bit later, but we went after Lorenzo. There was some interest in hearing at least what we had to offer, and we gave a great presentation for him and his team, and continued the dialogue. And we sold him on a dream, and we sold him on a project. And he's the foundational piece of our club going forward as we lead into World Cup 26. And a guy like him, and you've seen in the short time he's been here, he can change a game. He can make special plays. He could score special goals. And teams that win championships, and we saw it here with Sebastian and Josie, teams that win championships have special players that step up in big moments. What we now have to do is we have to round out the team a bit more defensively, so we're not letting up 1.8 goals a game, and that'll happen this offseason. But we now went out and got the pieces offensively that really can help us win. And so Lorenzo is a great person, great spirit, good character, and he and I kind of developed a bit of a bond over a few months period time. And I think I believed in him, and I think he kind of believed in me and the project that we talked to him about here at TFC. And one of the things also is when we talked to him about Napoli and some of the clubs in the Premier League that were recruiting him, MLSE is bigger than them all. And so even though TFC is a smaller team per se than a Napoli or certainly teams in the Premier League and other teams in Serie A, our organization, MLSE, is as large as almost any in the world in terms of an NBA team and an NHL team, an MLS team, a CFL team, and we kind of talked about MLSE being part of the landscape here in Toronto, which is a world-class city, and so that really appealed to him.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, again, congratulations, Bill, with that signing. I do want to drop something here on the record too. When I was doing the Googling and YouTubing, I seen the content of bringing in Lorenzo, and hopefully I'm saying that correct. And I felt I was already in love with TFC because TFC was the biggest club here in Canada and Toronto, close to me. But I felt more in love with the content, seeing the behind the scenes, and that's what fans love, including myself. With saying that, I seen being on the grounds, I seen what it does. People that locally that are fans of him already bring up more fans, more ticket sales, and it was cool. It was cool to see that engagement. From where I am. Also, you mentioned you guys have to put on a presentation. We get to see the front end of the signing, but there's a lot to do in the back end with bringing in this player. You mentioned a presentation. Can you just, if possible, share a little bit more of that process of the presentation, building a relationship? How long was that process until Lorenzo was able to say that this is something that I want to move forward with? How long did that take?
Yeah, it was about a 2.5 month process. We met Lorenzo's agent in Naples,
Mm.
and what I had done is I had actually put together a video. We have a great content team here at MLSE, and it's actually a funny story about it. But I remember when the Leafs were recruiting John Tavares, they put together a great video for John, which Brendan had shared with me, and so I went to our head of marketing, Shannon Hosford, and Alex Kim, and I said, I want to put together a video for Lorenzo to talk to him about Toronto, the city, to talk to him about MLS league, and then to go into MLSE and then to TFC, and to kind of bring it through to him. And I remember when we met with the agent, I think it was a courtesy meeting, and we showed him this video, and I knew right away that he could see the vision, and that this was a real club and a real organization. And a funny story is when I saw the first version of the video, I was going to leave for Naples in 2 days, and it was done through Google Translate, and so we did everything in Italian, but it wasn't good. And so I called a next door neighbor of mine, who's an Italian guy, Jerry Gentili, and I asked him to take a look at it. He said, "There's no way you can go to Italy with this." And he said, "I have a suggestion. A friend of mine was a DJ at Chin Radio, and Italian speaking." And so an hour later, I met with Luciano Lista at my friend Jerry's house, and I showed him the video and I showed him the copy, which was what we'd gone through. And he asked if he could rewrite it in Italian first, and then Alex Kim, who's our producer, the next day we met with Luciano, and Alex then had Luciano voice it, so he's known as the voice to Lorenzo. And he voiced it, and then Alex did the video to his voice, and it was a whole narrative about kind of what I talked to you about Toronto and MLS and MLSE and then TFC. And so it was a really great piece. It was custom. So we had references to Lorenzo kind of towards the end of the video joining TFC. And it was, when Lorenzo first watched it, it was really emotional, and you could tell that it grabbed his heart. And, it was part of the kind of sales process. But I say this, if not for Alex Kim and the video that he made, I think we would have just been any other team, because it really spoke to him.
Understood. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
And it was what we did too is we had a private case for him, and we actually put this beautiful map of Toronto, and we found out what type of restaurants he likes, tattoo parlors. He's all into tattoos and different things that the Insignes were interested in. And we laid out all these landmarks on this kind of nice piece that we did for him. And then underneath that was his own iPad that had this video in it, and these different pictures of places in Toronto. And so he literally just hit it, and the video came on. And so it was really cool, and had a picture of him essentially with his number 24 here in TFC.
Yeah, that's really cool. Cool. Very cool activations. I seen the video with Mastercard in the restaurant. That was really cool. It's nice.
Yeah, yeah. So that was a good friend, Antonio Perone. And so fast forward to November of 21, Lorenzo sent over his agent, his advisor, a guy named Rafael Colello, and a couple other people, his lawyer, to really get a feel for Toronto and our club, and because he's still playing with Napoli at the time, and we actually wound up having dinner the last evening at Postacino, which we did the MasterCard, and that's where we actually agreed on financials pretty much, and I knew then, okay, I think we can get this deal done from a financial perspective. But still a lot of runway to go, and we hadn't even really engaged with the player yet, and because he's with Napoli, and so eventually, I think this new project, that the timing was right for him to, at this stage of his career, to leave, and we were able to get him on board. And so part of it is, my good friend Andrea D'Amico told me it was destiny when we first talked about it, but a lot of hard work went into it. But, even at a place like Postacino, Antonio Perone made them feel at home, made them feel welcome. He invited them into his home and gave them kind of a little bit of a view of an Italian-Canadian family here in the GTA. And so it was a lot of different things and a lot of different people that we had involved in the process, but eventually he came here, and like I said, he's the foundational piece as we build towards World Cup 26.
Wow, that's amazing. I have a couple more questions, Bill. I want to be respectful of your time. Do you have like 15 minutes?
Yeah, no, Kareem, for sure.
Awesome. There's also players like Gareth Bale coming to the MLS, Cavani, Chiellini Cavani.
Chiellini,
Juventus, a lot of big name players that are coming to the MLS. Even David Beckham back in the day, and then him starting up his own MLS team, Inter Miami. So we're seeing this collaboration with Europe to North America, and the value that it's bringing to the MLS. I mean, the MLS, my perspective as of where I am is really cool, really impressive, very strategic, and I think genius overall. But let me see. This is what I wanted to ask you. As the president of TFC and the Toronto Argonauts, I know we're not talking about the football team, but what does your day-to-day look like, work schedule? Your day-to-day work schedule look like?
Different every day. The key from a leadership position is really knowing your priorities, and those priorities shift throughout the year. Last year at this time, I had a vision of kind of rebuilding the team, and going out and getting some superstars that could re-energize our fan base and kind of start a new foundation that we were going to build off over these next 3 or 4 years. And that also involved a new head coach, which, eventually we wound up being able to get Bob Bradley from LAFC. And that's where, a year ago, it was about coming up with who are we going to be and what are we going to be in the next 5 years. And so, as I meant, we're still in that process a year later, but we've checked a lot of the boxes. And, part of that plan is also being active in the transfer market. We have a number of young players that have a lot of interest from European clubs, and you may see us be active there. But that was kind of what I spent a lot of my fall on, was how we're going to remake this team. We had a really good run for 5 years, from 2016 to 2020. We got hit pretty hard with COVID, but we were at a point where I really needed to kind of blow it up a bit and rebuild it, and that was the vision, to go out and get some world-class players. And build a new foundation for this team as we go forward. And I think the World Cup coming here in 2026 is going to be a transformational event for the sport in this country and in North America. But my days are, are never the same, but they're always towards one goal, and that's winning. And it's hard to it's hard to go through two seasons like we've gone through. But what I've never take my eye off is what we want to do and what we want to be. And so we had to make some really difficult decisions and moves, transactions. But I feel now we have the semblance of a foundation in place to go forward where we can win. And we still need some pieces to add in this off season, but every day, I never take my eye off of what we need to do or what we have to do to be a winning team. And how that is every day, though, is much different. So if you could ask me, today what I did for the most part, I was in my office. I had some meetings. Today was a good day because we had some company-wide bonuses and incentive plans that we were able to distribute, and had a chance to meet with a number of different staff over the last couple of days, and had a chance to watch a little bit of training for the game tomorrow. I have an event later this evening with Mayor Tory, which I'll attend. And so it's just, every day is a little bit different, but that's what makes it fun. But you never take your eye off the ball. That's the key. Is I always know where we're going and where we need to go. And sometimes it's not always a smooth path. I always say, think of it as you're driving your car down the road and a tree falls in your way. You got to figure out how to get around the tree. And so sometimes things happen that you didn't plan for and that are sometimes out of your control. And it's how I think at the end of the day, a lot of, you're judged by how you react to certain circumstances. And so for us, it was coming up with a new plan for TFC. How can we be from, really this year, into 2027, how can we be a competitive team again like we were from 2016 to 2020?
Got it. Yeah. I apologize for the time above. I don't have a plan with Zoom, so that's why that's there. What's the best advice you've received from Michael Dell? Am I saying that correctly? His last name?
Yeah. Michael's he's not long gone, but he was the CEO of the company. He's down in Florida now. He took a new job with Signature. We had a good relationship. Wasn't very involved on the team side at all. Managed the business downtown. He and I had a good relationship. So we were able to really kickstart and push forward TFC's business, and we were able to drive our fan base, our season tickets. We were able to drive our sponsorships, and so that was the key for us. With Messi and Brendan and myself, is the ability to work with the folks at head office at 50 Bay Street, because that's where all the support functions are, and ticket sales and sponsorship, and finance and HR and marketing, legal, and down the line. It's important to have good relations there, and Michael and I had a good relationship, so it was all good from that standpoint.
Understood. Yeah, I when I was doing the Googling, I seen that he was the CEO or former CEO of MLSE. That's why I asked. You guys recently did a collaboration with OVO Drake. That was really cool. How did that come about? I mean, if you could share the long story short, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, well, look, there's a relationship there with the Raptors, and they've had some success. And Shannon Hosford, who's our chief marketing officer, when we went out and were in the process of getting Lorenzo, she approached OVO about doing a collaboration with TFC, that we were gonna bring in a global superstar, and we're really going to energize TFC again and what we're doing going forward. And so the timing was right for them as a company. We got clearance from MLS to do it, and everything sold out immediately, which I think was a real plus for both OVO and for MLSE, TFC, and such that they're going to, order new quantities and get ourselves back on sale again. And so, it's always good when you over exceed expectations to start with. So it's been a resounding success so far for us, and they're a really cool company. I had a chance to meet their COO. And he was really pleased with the reaction from our fan base and the community in general. So they're cool pieces.
Yeah, I mean, it's Drake. We love Drake. Toronto loves Drake, right?
Yeah, no, he's like, I'm from Long Island, New York, and so like Billy Joel was our guy in New York, and he would sing the national anthem, and with the Rangers and the Mets and so on. Here it's Drake, and he's a great representation of Toronto, and he's a good friend of Messi. And so we're really excited to have that collaboration.
Yeah, and it's really cool to see he's really involved in the community and in Toronto. So it's really nice to see the collaboration with TFC. I know, Bill, we're gonna cut off here in 2 minutes. When it cuts, can I send you another link just to wrap up?
Sure.
Um, what advice would you give to people coming out of college or university, or pro contracts that want to work in the sports business?
Yeah, it's not an easy business to get into. A lot of times you'll find ex-athletes who kind of get their start in the business similar to me, coming off the playing field and being a general manager in the minor leagues. I recommend networking, trying to see who that may know someone that's working in a sports team or a sports league for that matter. I think you have to be prepared to go where the job is. So we had a young intern recently named Isaac Walji who really worked hard to get an internship with us, and he eventually did. And that led to a full-time job with the Vancouver Whitecaps. And he moved for the first time in his life all the way out to Vancouver, but he's now in the business and he's getting paid to do so as opposed to an internship. I also think if anyone has the opportunity to get an internship, they should. They're very valuable. It allows the student to experience what it's like to be working for a sports team or sports league. It also allows the team or the league to kind of kick the tires, for lack of better words, and get a feel for the student. And I think since I've been here, we've hired 8 or 9 of our interns in full-time roles. And so, it's usually beneficial and it gives people experience. And, it's hard to know exactly what you want to do. And so sometimes it allows you to get a feel for what it's like. But, like I said, knock on a lot of doors, network. There's going to be a lot of doors won't open and some will be closed. But one eventually opens if you work hard enough and you try hard enough. And sometimes you just need to go where the job is too. It may not always be in the city where you want to live. It may be someplace else. From personal experience, I became a much more well-rounded executive by actually experiencing different cities and different cultures.
Yeah, that's amazing. Okay, I just have like 5 more questions and then like 5 more.
Sure.
Okay, cool. What would you say are the 3 biggest challenges you faced in your career?
I'd say I'm facing one of them, if not the biggest right now. Rebuilding a club that, was a championship contender for 5 years, and 2021 and 2022 being out of the playoffs. The opportunity in front of us now and me is rebuilding this team into a championship team and a championship club. And so, major challenge. The league is competitive. There's a lot of smart people around the league, and that though is what is my biggest challenge right now, is how do we get back to that place, because winning is not easy, and it's not something to take for granted. I think probably the second was when I was in Tampa. I worked for Major League Soccer. Back then, it's crazy to think of it now, but we were actually a league-owned team. We didn't have enough interest in the league where we had enough owners, and so they had Tampa, and I think Dallas was another league-owned team at the time. And the team folded. MLS had to contract because at that point it just couldn't justify operating a league-owned team without having an owner to fund the losses. And that was really difficult, and it put me at kind of a career crossroads and what I was going to do. And that's when I had the opportunity to go work in the NBA and the NFL. So that was a big challenge. Was leaving the sport, having the team, basically contract and then go into another sport. So that was a big challenge, and like I mentioned earlier in the podcast, I think it's one of the best things I ever did, and really made me much more well-rounded. And then, the only other challenge that I've experienced, and actually it's in every place you go to, is just adapting to a new environment, a new culture. There's many lessons I've learned, and my style of management that I bring with me along the way. But every job, every team, every city is different, and you have to be very respectful of the history. You have to be respectful of the type city you're living in and the type people you're around, and being able to bring some of yourself into a new situation. Like here in Toronto, they needed someone to really lead the organization and take on the vision that Tim Lewicki had. When we went out for the big players, and bring everyone together from the business side, from the soccer side, and bring everyone together in a different country, because I'm not Canadian, right? So it was understanding the history of TFC, understanding the city, and bringing it all together. And much different in Salt Lake when I got there. They didn't have a stadium. We had to build a new stadium, kind of another situation where take a team that had historically lost, and how do you build them into a contender again, in an environment out in the West where I had never been. I lived in LA for a year, but I had never been in this. It's kind of the Rocky Mountain region. So just that's another challenge. So really those three things I'd say right now in Toronto, the Tampa situation, and then just moving to the different cities. It's always a challenge, and then adapting. I have a wife, I have kids, how they adapt to the different areas. So that's never easy. And especially even this year with all the change we made this summer, there's a lot of things in terms of moving the players and their families that takes a player's mind off of just playing, because there's a lot going on. So that anyone that moves to a new location, new jobs, knows what I mean. It's not always smooth sailing.
Yeah. Off topic question. It's kind of on topic, but off topic. I'm just curious to know, for high profile players, do they move around the city with security, or are they
we have security for our guys in certain situations, as does MLSE for all our teams. But for the most part, as I mentioned, a lot of these guys love the quality of life here in Toronto, and the people in this market are respectful of the athletes, and they love them. They love to see them. It's for the Jays players, the Raptors, the Leafs players, TFC players. Autographs, ask for a picture, whatever. But people do it with great respect here, and that's what I love about Toronto. It's a great sports city. They love their athletes, though, right? And even in the toughest time, it's amazing right now. We've had a tough year, and I really, the hope was that these guys could come in, and we actually went on a good run there. We were 4-1-3 over 8 games, and then the last 3 games just defensively letting up too many goals each game. But the fan base, seemingly is really excited about what we've done here midway through the season, and what we'll look to do here in the off season. And so there's a lot of excitement. There was one fan who I know, he said to me, he says, the most important thing is you gave us hope again.
Mm.
And so it was really cool to hear that, because I think they could see kind of some of the talent that we brought in, and that's going to serve us well as we go into next year.
Yeah, that's powerful. I apologize for bringing this up, but COVID-19 did happen. It wasn't something good for everyone. But are you? I heard you talk a little bit about it before, so I won't tap into it. But are you guys prepared for another, quote unquote, COVID to come?
I mean, let's hope that never happens again, because it was, I think it was one of these things that um, it's no book, there's no plan. There's, you again, how you react to the various situations. I think for the most part, we looked after our players really well and their families here in Toronto, and then when we were down in Hartford and then in Florida. What happened with us a bit is we handled it really well when we were displaced in Hartford, Connecticut. We had a veteran team. We had brought in a player, Pablo Piatti, who was very popular, and he kind of fit in well. And we had existing coaching staff that had been here for a while, and so it was a good situation. We stayed at a good hotel. We had a stadium, which was our stadium in Hartford, Connecticut. No one else had played there. And we wound up finishing second best in the league that year, knocked out in the first round of the playoffs, but we had a very good record, very good season. And I think we handled that first year of COVID really well. And then the second year of COVID, again, as a bit of a veteran team, I think it was really difficult for players and families to be displaced again. And, as best we could, look after them. We had a number of families that moved down, and, we put them up down in Florida. But it was really difficult playing in someone else's building. We played in Orlando Stadium. We actually played in the CCL. When we won, we actually played at Disney's complex, which was actually even better. But we couldn't do that for MLS games. We had to play in Orlando. And it was and then, we had an entirely new coaching staff. And I think it was real, just a combination of all these different things hit us, and the wheels fell off the bus. We weren't prepared with a veteran team to be on the road again for that long. A new coaching staff who never had the opportunity to integrate themselves at our training ground here up in Toronto. And eventually, it led to losses. And some of the new players that we had brought in didn't work out. And and again, in part, I think we were displaced. And so it's there's lessons to be learned. And again, I hope it doesn't happen again, because I think it's a really difficult situation. Here in Canada, they had different restrictions and different laws. When we went down to Florida, it was like COVID didn't exist. And then up here, you couldn't go anywhere without a mask. So just different restrictions and so on. But I don't know if anyone could be prepared for that. It's, let's just hope we don't get to that.
Yeah, for sure. Pivoting on to a more positive note, what are three of the biggest success stories you've had?
2017, 2009, and 1999. So the three times been fortunate for my teams to win a championship. So my first was in 1999 with the Minnesota Thunder. Our head coach, a guy named Buzz Lagos, his son Manny played in MLS. Really great group of guys, and we won at home. We actually got the home game, so that was great. And then in 2009, with Real Salt Lake, had a great coach in Jason Kreis, and Garth Lagerwey was our GM. Great guy. He and I have a great relationship. Dave Checkitz was our owner. And, we beat the LA Galaxy and David Beckham actually at Seattle Stadium in 2009, and had kind of come into our own, had a really good team with Kyle Beckerman and Nat Borchers and Will Johnson, who wound up coming here to Toronto, was on that team, and Nick Raimondo, goalkeeper. Euromosisian. So that was a lot of fun. That was my first championship in MLS. And then in 2017 here in Toronto, where you kind of had a foundation that had been put in place by Tim Lywicki. You had a young coach in Greg Vanney who was really coming into his own. Tim Bez was the GM. He and I had a great relationship. And, we had some real special players. And Josie and Michael, certainly who's still here, Jonathan Osorio and Sebastian, obviously. And, you had guys that we brought in, Stephen Betashore and Drew Moore. And that was a special team. Victor Vasquez and Chris Mabinga had joined the team that year. That was arguably the most powerful team I've ever been around, a really strong team. And to again experience a home game and win it at home for our fans was really special. So those are my three, bar none, my three most special moments I've ever had.
Nice. Bill, correct me if I'm wrong. It seems to be from my learnings that once a team wins the league, that you have the fans forever. Is that true? Would you say that's true, or?
No, I don't think it's true. I think fans and fan bases. There's core fans, which Toronto has. We have core fans that are with us, through good and bad, and they're always going to be. They bleed red. They're TFC fans, and a lot of teams have those. But then there's also what I would say the fans that maybe come to 1 or 2 games a year, but when you're really winning and you have special players like we had with Javenko, now with Insigne, they're coming 8 or 9 times a year or 10 times a year, right? And that just it kind of adds and I think what we did here in this city is Toronto became a sports team in this city that outside of soccer circles, people knew about. People knew about the little Italian guy that was playing for us, and people knew Josie Altidore and Michael Bradley, and MLSE did a good job, kind of positioning the team, and we won, and that was really good, and people were proud of that. And that's the most important thing. You can, if your team is starting to languish a bit over time, and you don't have, and I said, if you don't have superstars that people want to see, it can affect your attendances and your fan base. I know after I left Salt Lake and the team had some tough years, their fan base dwindled, and I think it's been coming back for them. They have an exciting team again, and they're fighting for the playoffs, and the fan base has come back, which is good to see.
Second last question. You guys have 2 young but very talented players, Jaquil Marshall Rudy, that's 18, and Jaden Nelson, which is 19. Where do you see them playing in the next 2 to 3 years?
Look, I think both of them have shown glimpses of where they can go. Still young, still going through the learning curve. Jaquil had broken in as a starter, if you remember, in the beginning of the year at right back, and really acquitted very well for himself. And it was unfortunate. He had a knee injury and that required surgery. I think he missed 12 or 13 games, and it set him back a bit because as we were a very young team in the beginning of the year, and as those young players got better and the team started to play more, not only did he take a step backwards in terms of the injury, but he had to catch up to everyone else. And so for a young kid like Jaquil, he had to cope with that and deal with that, and then try to win back a starting spot, try to get back playing time, try to get minutes, which became more difficult, especially this summer when we brought in more experienced players. Richie Laria being one, and Mark Anthony and Lorenzo and Federico onto the team. And so Jaquil has such a high ceiling, and there's no doubt in my mind that he could be at some point an all-star in MLS, but he also could follow in the path of an Alphonso Davies or some of these other players from MLS, Brendan Aronson and Tyler Adams and so on, and maybe go on to Europe for a big team. And so the great thing about MLS now is that you you can make a career here, like Jonathan Osorio has, and do very well financially, still play for your national team, enjoy big crowds, enjoy some fanfare. But we're a global sport. And so, those opportunities will be there for him. Same with Jaden. Jaden, this is the first year he's really played a lot of minutes in MLS. He's shown glimpses where he's exciting. He's a baller, I like to say. Needs to get a little bit more dialed in defensively in the final third. Just finalizing some, executing some of the final plays and you'll see that. I mean, he's going to be a guy that's going to score goals. He's going to get assists, but he's 19. And so he's still processing the speed of play. He's still processing the different opponents that he plays against. But he's a kid that, his future is bright. And again, it could be here like a Jonathan Osorio. It could be overseas as opportunities present themselves. Both of them have a lot of interest in them from European teams. And so, we work with the players, the agents, their families, and we try to figure out what is best for the club, what's best for the player. And so those are two guys, though, that both have bright futures.
Nice. It's really nice to see TFC, give young talent an opportunity on the big stage. I think it has a trickle effect to the younger generation to look up to say that could be me one day. I think that's amazing.
Yeah, it's having the fine balance between playing young players but also winning, and so you have to have the right balance of that. And we had a lot of young players playing all at once, and it was the first MLS experience for most of them, and they got bloodied. And I think all of them will be better for it. And I think they'll be better players as we go into next year. But it's a combination of getting the young guys minutes, but also not sacrificing your team. And that's why we went out and we got more experienced players, which had, kind of were more MLS ready to be a championship team. And so it's finding the right balance there. But we still, like, even now, TFC2, we have a number of homegrown players that, we're now in the Final Four, per se, being in the Eastern Conference Final. And so there's a really good pathway of players coming up who are going to challenge. And that's what you want.
Got it. I guess pretty interesting. When I was walking before a call, I was thinking about it. Just a quick question. You guys have a lot of young players. To me, I consider them young. I'm not too sure how you guys consider them. Ayo Akinole, Luca Petrasso, Noble, so some young guys. Even I grew up playing with Luca Petrasso actually at Woodbridge, playing against Ayo and Noble actually. So these guys, I've also had them on the podcast as well, which was nice. These guys to me are young players, and a couple other young players on the team playing with the first team. Is this something done strategically? And are there other teams in the league that are doing this as well, or is it a strategy that TFC is taking to later down the line be an advantage because these guys will then be the veterans?
Yeah, no, it was a strategy this year when when Bob came in. We knew we weren't going to be able to get Lorenzo till the summer and some of the other players that we had targeted, and so Bob wanted a bit of a fresh start with the roster, and there was a number of young players that he felt had some talent that had room to grow as players, and we knew it was going to be a bit inconsistent, which is what you get with young players. But it was going to be a great opportunity for them to sink or swim and really show what. And like I said, we've seen moments, we've seen glimpses. We've also seen shortcomings and that guys have to work on if they want to really, get to be, consistent, regular MLS starters. And so I think this team's, FC Dallas has done it very well. Philadelphia Union has been able to do really well, graduating players into their first team. And what Philadelphia has done is they really have a good, well-rounded team, which with experienced players and then some kind of young, homegrown players. What we're really ideally as we go into this next kind of 5-year phase, we're going to have a number of homegrown players that hopefully some will become like Jonathan Osorio or Richie Laria that could, be starters on an everyday basis. But we're also going to be a club, though, that's going to go get superstars and have the Lorenzo Insignes and the Federico Bernardeschi's, and then round that out with other Canadian national team players and what I call MLS, proven starters. So it's finding that right balance. But you will always see homegrown players get the opportunity to play, get the opportunity to start. The key is, and we haven't found that yet with our homegrown players, but is winning with the homegrown players on the field. That's that, when you have, 3 or 4 young players on the field who are homegrowns, can you win? And I think, if I look at the 2 teams, I'd say FC Dallas has done that very well. And I think Philadelphia has really done a good job of incorporating their homegrown talent and then rounding it out with really solid European talent and MLS talent. So those are the 2 teams that I'd say have done that. So we're trying, our goal will, I think, where we differentiate in the future from those 2 clubs is our ability to go get high level DPs.
Understood. And last question before we move on to like the speed questions, it's like very short. How are you guys preparing for the 2026 World Cup, which is 4 years down the pipeline?
Yeah, well, we're intimately involved. I'm on kind of the leadership committee. Larry Tannenbaum and Mayor Tory are the chairman. It is. I think it's going to be tremendous. We're going to host the games at BMO Field, which is BMO Field kind of rolls into TFC's P&L, and so it's something we're intimately involved with, and we're really excited to us in Vancouver be the Canadian representatives for this World Cup. I think there's going to be a number of players from our team, some, maybe some of the young homegrowns that are coming up right now that are going to be part of that national team in 2026. And so we're, everything we're doing, this kind of new plan that we laid out is all towards World Cup 26 and then how we're going to, hopefully explode our business after that World Cup is here. And so it's something in almost every conversation we talk about it, and it's something we're all really looking forward to.
Nice.
I think, what my hope is that it can do for the Canadian national team players what the 94 World Cup did for some of the American players, the Alexi Lalas's of the world and the John Harks and the Tab Ramos and Marcelo Balboas. They became very well-known athletes in the U.S. After the 94 World Cup. And I'm hoping that here in Canada, the guys that are playing on that Canadian national team that are still playing here in MLS, that they can become, kind of household names. That's what I'm really excited about.
Got it, yeah. And I believe TFC will win again, so I'm excited to see that soon.
We will at some point. We still got a lot of work in front of us, and very important off season for us. But I do think the foundation's in place for future success.
Absolutely. Last 5 speed questions. They're fun questions. What's your favorite sport?
So believe it or not, because I'm not going to say soccer because that's the obvious. Is wrestling, amateur wrestling. So my older son, was a very, very good wrestler, folk style wrestler, and so I still follow. He went to university for it, but got concussed, so no longer does it. But I follow a lot of the kids in the NCAA that he used to wrestle against, and then the Olympics and the freestyle version and so on. So I actually am a fan of the sport of amateur wrestling.
Got it. What about your favorite team within the sport of soccer or football in Europe?
I used to be a Celtic fan, and but I actually haven't followed them in a while. I guess some of it is I really root for teams where I have a personal connection and people that I know. So, a friend of mine I used to play with, a guy named Joe Barone, is the president of Fiorentina. So I root for them. An old friend, Ivan Gazidis with AC Milan, he's their CEO, and I root for them, right? Darren Eales, who was just with Atlanta, is now with Newcastle. So I'm going to start rooting for them. I'm rooting for Jesse Marsh with Leeds. And so it kind of goes around who I have personal connections with, or people maybe I've crossed paths with at some point, and just root for them. So that's kind of I root for Bayern Munich, and I don't even know Alphonso Davies, but I love him as a player and as a personality. He's Canadian. He came from Vancouver, and so I root for them too. So for me, it's more of a personal connection, and either through executives or players.
Got it. Messi or Ronaldo?
Whew. I'm I'm gonna give the unpopular. I'm actually gonna say Ronaldo, um, and I'm gonna say I think Messi's the better player. So I'll go on record saying that. But I would pick Ronaldo, and one of the things that I remember Federico Bernardeschi saying to me when he was at Juventus, he prided himself on being the hardest worker on the team, and he said when Ronaldo came in, he realized how much more he had to work, and how Ronaldo came in, even at his age, at 36 years old or whatever, when he joined Juventus, his work ethic and everything that he put into being a pro. And this is coming from Federico Bernardeschi, saying that, I worked this hard and I was the hardest worker on the team. And then all of a sudden, Ronaldo comes in and it's just another level. And so, to have someone like that who works like that every single day in training, good teammate. So while I think Messi is the greatest player I've ever seen, to have a player like Ronaldo come on your team and that kind of work ethic, that if you asked me a year ago, I would have said Messi. But now that I learned that from Bernardeschi, I love Ronaldo.
Yeah, one of my buddies, Sean Hundle, he used to play with TFC too.
Yeah.
Just
Yep.
met Messi a couple of days. They were playing against the Argentina national team. That was pretty cool to see.
Yeah.
What's your favorite food?
Favorite what?
Food.
Food. Good pasta dish. I love pasta.
What kind of, like tomato or the white sauce? Which one?
I have a good friend, Aurora, makes me penne vodka. So that's my favorite.
And the last one, your favorite artist musically. There's one answer I'm actually looking for here.
I'm a big Beatles fan. So it's the Beatles. I'm a big Beatles fan.
Got it. I was looking to hear Drake just because of the collaboration and stuff like that, just for jokes. But yeah.
I'm old. I love my music from the 60s and 70s. So I'm an old soul at heart, and I love, even though I wasn't around. They disbanded in 1970. I was a young kid, but I love the Beatles music.
Got it. Well, Bill, before we go, I just want to thank you for taking the time for joining us on the One Soccer Nation podcast today.
All right, Kareem, and I wish you the best of luck with your podcast going forward.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Cheers.